You are listening to Able Radio, simplifying productivity for small business owners everywhere. If you are looking for 1% improvements that add up to big results, this is the place for you. Every week, we learn about simple systems and tools that will help you build the business and life you've always wanted. Now here's your host, Zachary Sexton.
Welcome to the Able Podcast. This is a weekly productivity podcast where we interview inspiring people to uncover the best methods, resources, systems, and techniques to help you and, well, frankly, me, reach more of our goals. And today I have a special guest and met through a mutual friend, and I'm going to link to the interview that I got to listen to beforehand on a Life Skills That Matters podcast, where you can find out more of Meredith Bell's background and history, which I'm super interested in. She was nice enough to share with me how she got into coaching and consulting in her journey for the past 30 years. But Meredith, I'll let you give more of your introduction, but your link bio says that you help deliver skills that inspire others to do their best work. Could you explain how you do that? What do you get up to from day to day, helping leaders develop skills to inspire others?
Hi, Zach. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. I guess my focus from the get-go in terms of my professional career has always been to help other people and to teach. And I started that as an elementary school teacher and evolved into an administrative position that didn't work out because of politics and bureaucracy. So I went out on my own in 1982, and I haven't worked for anyone since then. And I have always been really just passionate about my own self-development and helping other people with their development, because there are so many times that we get in our own way. You know, we do things without realizing the impact it's going to have on other people. So I especially love that we have products. I don't personally work with individual leaders, but we have developed software tools that are used by consultants, coaches, and inside of companies by the business owner or someone in, leadership and development or talent management or human resources, with the goal of helping leaders build the skills, the communication skills, and also those inner strengths that they need to have in order to be effective in getting the results that are needed from the people who are in their charge. So I just see so many times when, a manager who means well will say the wrong thing, will feel like he or she has to jump in with the solution instead of drawing it out of the other person. Some of these things, just take raising your awareness level, first of all, to find out what really works well versus what is going to help me or get in the way of me having the results that I want. So it's helping those leaders understand what good communication skills look like, so that when they are in a situation with someone else at work, and interestingly, it carries over at home too, then they're able to engage the skill appropriately in order to have a real dialogue, real communication, and reach an understanding about, what needs to be done or processing what happened in a specific situation.
You say people get in their own way a lot of times. What are some self-sabotaging behaviors you see among leaders and their communication?
Well, I think a huge one is not listening well, because we aren't taught this skill anywhere that I know of in school. And so a lot of what people think of as listening is waiting for my turn to talk, which is really not listening. It's being polite, But all the while, the person is thinking about how they want to respond, what they want to say. Sometimes it's so that we look good, that we look like we know the answer, or we feel like we need to be the one giving advice, especially if we're in a leadership role. But the fact is, you are kind of crippling people if you take that approach, because when you are always the one dispensing answers or advice, you're creating dependence by that other person, because then they're afraid to go off on their own because you might not approve of what they did, but also you're keeping them from thinking for themselves. So you're sort of robbing them of the opportunity to come up with their own solutions. And we do it, with the best of intentions, because when someone comes to us with a question or a problem, it's natural to want to be helpful. But in fact, a good leader has to learn to ask questions and listen in order to help the person come up with their own solutions.
Okay, so just dispensing advice is not the most effective route there is. Questioning and having people come up with their own answers might be a better route. How do you start to do that as a leader in your organization, or just in your life, wanting to communicate better with people?
Great question. I really think it starts, Zach, from having a mindset or an attitude that I am here to serve. I am here to be of help. So what can I do? How can I be in order to be of greatest service to this person? I think starting with that as a framework and question, or attitude is really the key to becoming effective with others. Because when you do that, then the focus is not on you and how you're coming across. It's not on you having to come up with the right answers. And so imagine it relieves the pressure from having to be the all-knowing, all-wise, person. Instead, you adopt a mindset of curiosity, of humility, of asking questions, and then listening carefully to how the person responds so you can ask additional questions. So one of my favorite books on this is called The Coaching Habit. And one of the things that he advocates, he has 7 simple questions. And just to give you a couple of them, like, what's on your mind? And after the person says, then you could say, well, and what else? Because sometimes what they blurt out initially is not the real thing, the real issue. It's sort of the superficial, top of mind thing. But if you can help them go a little deeper, you'll be amazed at what gets uncovered and described. So that's, one part of it. The other then is being willing to be quiet and listen and simply say things that encourage the other person to continue speaking. So it's a different approach where you don't, and I still, this is a constant practice. It's not something you ever totally master, because if you're ever involved in a conversation that is emotionally charged for you or for both of you, it's hardest to adopt these attitudes and these questions at that time, because you have strong feelings about it. You want to jump in, you want to convince the person, but in fact, then that, sabotages the whole outcome, because the purpose is to truly gain an understanding of what's going on with this other person and how can you be most helpful to them at this moment.
I love that. And I've read that book as well, and I think it actually ties to something you said earlier. The reason why I enjoyed that book so much, and I pull it out in my coaching quite often, is because it relieves that pressure for me to come in and know all the answers. And we just had a conversation last week where you mentioned exactly that quote that you talked about is saying, well, I don't need to be the one who has all the answers. I just want to be the person who's here and can serve as powerfully as I can serve, and keeping the focus off yourself and off trying to look good and onto the other person is it works more effectively, and two, just like you said, it relieves the added pressure. And I think those questions, what's on your mind, what else, what's the challenge here, and so on, help individuals get to their own answers, which is 10 times more powerful than you just dispensing information like a Pez dispenser, like, come to me with all your problems, I'll solve them, and then you're the person who's dependent on me.
Yes. And this approach also works well after someone has had especially a negative experience, where you can ask questions that help them process what went on. And this gets at that, I think you mentioned at the top of the show, this whole idea of reflection, helping people to reflect on their experiences and learn from them so they don't repeat the same mistakes going forward. And I'd be happy to share the questions that we recommend using, whether you're processing this for yourself or you're helping someone else, learn from an experience they've just gone through.
Absolutely. It was on my list of questions to get in there.
Good.
My questions for questions. I first heard this on Stephen Worley's podcast, Life Skills That Matter, and I wrote it down. I reiterated it on my weekly learnings, which I review my journal every week, and that was one of the top things that I learned that week. And it's so helpful. It's so powerful. So when something good or bad happens, but particularly the bad, that's often the time that you can really learn something. The same time I heard you say these questions, I was reading a book called The Prophet, and those two came on the same days, and the quote was, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding." And I was like, oh my gosh, Meredith is helping you capture that knowledge a little bit more consistently, so you can make those little improvements, and making it a little bit less painful as well with these questions, because it identifies you from the problem. Like, you're not the person who's bad. It's, well, okay, this situation didn't go as you wanted it to. How do I make sure that doesn't happen again? So with that long-winded introduction, please share those 5 questions that people can use to reflect.
Well, I'm going to do that, but I want to emphasize something, because you just you alluded to it, and I want to make it really clear for the listeners. One of the reasons for going through these questions is to save yourself time down the road, not just from avoiding the same mistake, or the same reaction in a given situation, but it also silences that inner critic. And I'm sure we've all had this happen, where we didn't handle a situation as well as we would like, and we start beating ourselves up. And, I should have done this. I should have said that. Why didn't I do this? And we just go on and on. And these questions allow you then to analyze what happened and let it go. And that is so, so critical to the whole element of productivity, because as long as we're beating ourselves up and being critical, we are not able to give our full attention and energy to the task at hand. So this prevents us from getting hung up in the past. And I think that's a key benefit to doing it. And what I've seen, there's basically 5 questions, and I'll list them out and people can take notes about them. But once you've used these on a regular basis, you can, pull them up in your head anytime you want to when something is going on. And we've had people that have used our online coaching system where this is a core component to really help them think through, a situation so they can move past it fairly quickly and on to the next thing. Because the folks who are your listeners, business owners, entrepreneurs, they have so many balls in the air in a given day. And we just, because I know I'm one, so we can't afford to have our energy zapped by this negativity. So having said that, let's jump in. The very first question, and by the way, it's really best to write down your answers to this rather than it being a mental exercise, if you are able to do that. So the first one is, what happened? just go through the facts, this, then this, then this, then this. And then how did you feel about it? It's really important to do that left brain sequential, what happened, along with the more right brain, the feelings that are associated with it, because we're whole people and we have both elements at play. And then you want to ask, why did it happen that way? So you look at your motivations, what was going on at the time, the context for why it went down the way it did. And next, what were the consequences? What were the outcomes, the results? How did things turn out? Was the relationship enhanced, or not? And why? What was the fallout if it didn't go well? And then finally, you look at what will you do next time? So having analyzed the situation, what do you feel would be a better way to do it in the future? What might you say? What might you not say? What would you be sure that you want to do? And I think that process can be used for so many situations. I'll give you a quick example of when I used it, because of course I've been using this for many years. But I was at a conference, and many of your listeners may find themselves in a situation like this, where I was given an opportunity. Everybody in this, it was a pre-conference networking event, and all of us were given about a minute to introduce ourselves and say something about what we did and how we might be of benefit to the rest of the group. And I had given some thought to what I would say. But when my turn came, I was self-conscious. I didn't do a very good job, and no one came up to talk to me after. So when I went back to my room that night,
I help people.
Yeah. Well, it was just one of those things where, my mind just wasn't working and neither did my mouth. So it was just kind of boring. And so I went back to my room and I was just, kind of replaying the situation. Oh, I could have said this, or I wish I'd said that. And I finally caught myself and said, stop it. And I went through and wrote down the answers to these questions and processed it and looked at what I would do differently when I have the opportunity in the future. And so I was able then to let it go and focus my mind and my energy on the rest of the conference. But if I had not done that, of course I can't know exactly, but I would have been more likely to spend time fretting over how I'd handled that. And, trying to redo the past is a fruitless exercise. So we waste a lot of time in the past. And so this whole exercise really helps you let go of the past and move into the future with greater confidence because you have a plan of what you'll do next time.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'm sure you have a very good, concise, okay, this is my 1 minute spiel, this is my 3 minute spiel, this is especially since your communication is your main tool that you really teach people. And I'm sure most people can relate to that story. I recently joined a business networking group where we have 45 seconds to say, who we are, what we get up to, and how we can help people out. And the first couple times it's like, ooh, man, okay, I need to think of something in advance in order to do that. So using that exercise is a way just to make that happen consistently. And I absolutely agree. This is a productivity tool because it takes your time, your energy, and attention and focuses it to produce a particular result so you don't waste your time, energy, and attention, which is really all you have in order to produce whatever you're producing in the information age or at your business or in your work. So this super powerful tool. Everybody, if you're going for a run or if you're in the car, do your best to memorize these or write them down and use it next time you come across a situation. What's a good trigger for somebody to use these skills? So you said you noticed yourself, you were repeatedly thinking about, oh gosh, I wish I'd done this differently. I wish I'd done that differently. So that could be a good trigger. Are there any other good triggers for using these 5 questions for self-reflection?
Well, for yourself, yes, anytime you're feeling a negative emotion or having a negative thought, to catch yourself and ask, okay, what is this related to? What am I not happy about that I either did or didn't do? So that I can go through these questions quickly and get to the other side where I can, focus more. And by the way, Zach, these are really good for leaders, both at home, if you're a parent, and also at work, if you're a manager or a business owner, because when someone comes to you and they have made a mistake, it's natural to want to jump in and say, well, here's what you should have done, and here's what you need to do next time. And it goes back to you're not requiring them to then think for themselves and come up with their own solutions. And you know yourself, if somebody is dispensing advice to you, it feels really different than if you are, even if it's struggling, but if you're having to think through and come up with the solution yourself. It stays with you longer when you have had to, come up with the answer. When someone else gives it to you or hands it to you, for one thing, it might not be well received because they can take it as a criticism of how you handled the situation. And so it can actually harm the relationship rather than stepping back and calmly asking the person. And you don't have to be rigid about, asking exactly these questions in this order, but you want to get at that same information so that you're basically getting them to talk about what they see as their next step. And what you can do as a leader in that case is simply say, well, if you do that, how do you think it will go? Or how do you think the outcome will be different than what happened this time? So you help them to project into the future, anticipating, well, maybe I'll end up with this good thing happening, or maybe you're helping them realize, oh, there could be this negative effect that I had not considered before. But you're not overtly saying it. You're helping them draw it out for themselves.
Yeah, I didn't think of it until you mentioned that. It's an amazing parenting skill. So something goes down. What happened? Yeah, tell me a story about that.
Let me tell you a very quick story. When our daughter was in high school, she's 32 now, so this is many years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday because I handled it so poorly.
Oh, no.
So it's a reminder for me in the future, but she had been babysitting some neighborhood children. She came home and she was clearly upset over something that had happened, and it doesn't matter what it was. But I started to jump in at giving advice and saying, well, you need to do this, or you could have done this. And I was kind of off on, my own little spiel here, thinking I was being helpful. She, bless her heart, and to her credit, she interrupted me. She said, Mom, all I needed you to do was listen. I already handled it myself. That just caught me, it was like, uh-oh, I'm not practicing what I know here, because I jumped into mother mode, fix this child. She's unhappy. Let me get her out of being unhappy. And, it's the wrong approach, both with our kids and with the adults in the workplace, because we really don't want somebody else to fix us. Even though we might say we do, in reality, anything that we can do that helps someone become more self-reliant, independent, and responsible for themselves, we're better preparing them for the world, whether it's, a coworker, another, someone we supervise, or one of our kids.
Meredith, I can resonate completely. I haven't had a child yet, but I do have a fiance, and this is something that took me maybe a year to realize that when she comes with a problem, it's not my solution to be Mr. Problem Solver. It's my solution to be Mr. let's listen to this and let's see, what she wants to do with it versus solution. I think it's something that men have a harder time, just to be a little stereotypical, than women, where we're like, okay, there's a problem, let's solve the problem, and not necessarily listening to the feelings that are associated with it, not letting the other person figure out what those consequences were and why it happened that way and how they could handle it in the future, because you've got a completely different perspective than them, and that's not necessarily what they're looking for at the moment. So that's a way to bring it back into the family, because it's a good both skill for yourself to make these improvements. Also, what I've noticed too with the examples that you've given, it seems like a good coaching skill, and it's a good skill for both the business and both the family. So this is wonderful. But you even said it yourself. You went on a habit. You're like, oh, okay, well, there's a problem. I want to solve the solution. Knowing that these questions are out there and knowing that you could use them is one thing. Using them consistently is another. Do you have any suggestions for people on how to break that old habit of dispensing advice as soon as they hear of a problem?
Yes. What I would come up with is something that is, a cue for the person. So they become self-aware that when someone is talking to them and they sense that this is a listening moment, if you will, then just to repeat the word listen, listen, listen in their heads, I think could be very helpful because it will help them remember to keep their mouth shut and to pay attention not just to the words that someone is saying, but how they're saying them, how they look when they're saying them if it's an in-person conversation. So they're picking up on the body language, the tone of voice, the things that give really good clues about where that person is. And so being able then to simply make statements or frame them as questions. You seem really upset right now, or it sounds like you really haven't resolved this, even though you're saying that you have. So you're holding up what you're seeing or hearing to the other person and giving them permission to keep talking. I think that you can't learn anything about someone else when you're the one talking. So whatever phrase or word that a person might repeat in their head, whether it's listen or learn or be quiet, a word that reminds them that the best thing to do right now is to really listen, because someone may sincerely come to you wanting your advice and wanting you to solve their problem. But I think it's really important as a way, again, of fostering independence and self-reliance is thinking about questions that you can ask them that require them to do the thinking, even if in that moment they might appear frustrated with you or impatient. You know in your heart that they will remember the solution much better and much longer if they come up with it themselves.
So my big takeaway from our last 20, 25 minutes here is that the key to good communication is actually listening, and it works really well. I have this quote on the Evernote where I have some notes we for the conversation we were going to have, and it's from George Bernard Shaw. It says, the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has actually taken place. And you started at the beginning saying, well, we're taught to not talk over people, but a lot of times people are just waiting for their turn to put in their zinger or to get their point across. And your big message that you pride yourself in being a good listener, and that's helped you become more successful. Other than helping people, and this will be our last question before we part ways, other than helping people find their own problems and solve their own problems so they have longer longer lasting results in that situation. What are some other reasons why it's so valuable as a life skill to be a great listener?
I love that question because I was just sitting here thinking of something I had not brought up, and this is the perfect opportunity to put it in here. And that is, and I can't remember if this is a quote that I read somewhere, but one of the greatest needs of every human being is to feel understood. Mm-hmm. And when you are willing to give your full attention to another person and really hear them out and let them express themselves and show them by the questions that you ask and the responses that you make that you have truly understood them, that is one of the most powerful gifts that you can give another person. It happens so rarely because we're in a hurry. People rely on text messaging now and other forms of communication that are not the face-to-face giving full attention to someone else. And when you do that, it's truly a gift. And the nice thing is you both benefit because that person, honestly, without sounding too mushy, they feel treasured. They feel really valued. And that is a fabulous gift. And if you're looking to build strong relationships with other people, whether it's a potential client or customer or an employee, or your life partner, if you are willing to give that kind of focused attention, they will feel it from you. And there will be a level of appreciation that is difficult to, measure or put a price tag on. It's the best way that I know of to build strong relationships.
That is a wonderful way to end the show, and that's a little bit what I was hoping to get out of that is your belief on why listening is just such a beneficial behavior, and it's something that I hope to continue to work on. I hope I did an okay job in this conversation. It is
absolutely.
It is,
yes.
Though I would say sometimes podcasting can be one of those things. And when I originally started doing this a couple of years ago, I did not listen whatsoever. I had my list of questions and I was going to pound through them. And I realized that when I listened back to the conversation, which is the benefit of recording the conversation, oh boy, that was hard to listen to. It seemed like I was interrogating the person versus having a conversation and trying to get some understanding from them. And just for somebody who's interested in maybe a hack for how to actually engage in the conversation, Meredith, the one you mentioned is nice. Listen, having a little mantra. I used a skill that a speech therapist taught me that was called question, comment. So I would ask a question, and then I would listen to the answer of that question, and I would ask a question of said question. So you can't ask a follow-up question unless you are actually listening to the person. And then if it's pertinent, I would add a comment in there, because if I'm if I'm asking somebody to share with me, it's nice, it's common human behavior to also share with that person, so it doesn't feel like such an interrogation. So I think both tools are gonna be in my toolkit from now forward. If people want to find out more about you or your company, Strong for Performance, where can I direct them? I'll make sure to put all the links in the show notes.
Sure. Well, on social media, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So if they look me up there, I think my profile is Meredith M. Bell, but my name as it's listed, if they do a search, is just Meredith Bell. And also on Twitter, I'm at Meredith M. as in Mary Bell. And then our website, where we have our online coaching and development tool for the workplace, is called which is FOR, performance.com. And there are some short videos there that will let you know a little bit about, that tool and how people use it.
Wonderful. Yeah. And if anybody needs advice on how to build a LinkedIn profile, just go to Meredith's, You're a rock star job. You're making me need to redo my whole thing. You were giving me some advice on that the other day,
Oh,
which
thank you.
just goes to show too. You came to the call. We were connected through a mutual friend, like I said, Stephen Worley, and your goal was just, hey, how can I serve? How can I make this a powerful conversation that Zach will never forget? You did that. You gave me some stellar advice, some stellar tools that I'm going to be using going forward. So I would definitely encourage connecting with you if this is an area that you're looking to improve, or even just say hi and a quick tweet thanks for sharing, because Meredith, I think I said it last time, you served again. I got served from.
Oh, that's great. Well, Zach, also on my LinkedIn profile, I've published more than 75 articles now. So there is a lot of information there in those LinkedIn Pulse posts that I think people could find value in.
I would agree. I read about 5 or 6 of them this morning. They were all very well done.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
People don't like receiving help from those that don't get their problem. If I walked over to the University of Texas math department, knocked on a professor's door, and tried to give him advice on a proof he was working on, he'd likely try to get out of the conversation as fast as possible. He would then install a peephole on his office door to make sure he could avoid me in the future. But if I somehow managed to ask the professor an insightful question, not likely, but somehow managed to ask an insightful question that showed I understood the problem he was working on, he might start to listen. Asking questions shows your competency. Asking questions helps other people feel understood. The last person that I hired asked me questions about my website. I shared my frustrations. He empathized with me and offered some solutions to the problems that I was having. I wasn't planning on hiring a website developer, but he asked the right questions. Asking questions will do other magical things too. The right question can make sure you are attempting to solve the right problem. Questions also let the person solve their own problem, which is much more powerful. As a productivity coach, here are questions I find myself asking. What are you working on? What are you trying to achieve? And by when? What results are you committed to achieving? What results have you been producing in the past? What is working for you? What's your biggest challenge right now? What difficulties does that challenge create for you? How does that show up in your business? How will you know if you've achieved your goal? What will people say? How will people feel? What results will you see? This is an excerpt from my weekly learnings. I have 3 learnings every week, and I'll put the link to the newsletter you can subscribe to if you want to get on that. But it hit me so hard because I had this conversation with another coach that works with small business owners, and then I listened to Meredith's conversation that we had actually months ago. So it had been a while, and the refresh was nice. But the power of questions seems to just be coming at me from all angles. So for you listening out there, if you come across a challenge, these 5 questions of what happened, how did you feel about it, why did it happen that way, what were the consequences, and what will you do next time can be very effective. And if you know somebody out there that can benefit from this message, if you go to theproductivityshow.com/14, you can share it on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, or just share the URL with them so your friends can start making 1% improvements in their life. And listening, truly listening to a person is something that I pride myself on doing when working with potential clients. And if you feel like you need to be listened to right now, if you're struggling with your productivity, if you're not taking those consistent actions on your goals, I would also invite you to get a free coaching session. If you go to zacharysexton.com/hire-me, you can scroll to the bottom and there's a button down there where you can get on my schedule for an hour call where I will be asking some of those questions that you just heard. So you can start to prep now, or you can work with me then on those questions, and we can try to figure out a personal solution to whatever productivity challenge you are facing right now. So thank you so much for tuning in. We will be here next Wednesday and continue to share 1% improvements that will help you be a more useful, less stressed, better question asking human being and business owner. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next Productive Wednesday.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Able Business Radio. Zach wants to help more small business owners like you make 1% improvements that add up to big results. Was this show helpful? Pay it forward. Subscribing and writing a review in iTunes is one of the best ways to help more people find out about the show. Thanks again for tuning in. We hope to see you here next Wednesday, where we will continue to share 1% improvements that will help you become a more useful, less stressed business owner.